guys, it's Talk and Tell with Holly and Kel. Welcome back for week 2 of our awesome series together. My name is Kelly Humphries, author, speaker, survivor, and hopefully an impactor of all things child abuse and stopping this insidious disease. We'll call it that because that's what it is, but we're here to make a difference, here to talk about some tough stuff. And this week, the wonderful Holly and I are going to talk about sexual violence, what it means, and go into the signs of abuse and what to look for. So I'm an author, as I said. I've written my own story. I come from a heart of experience. Everything I say is my own opinion, and I'm just putting that out there. But I'm also an author of my own story. I was abused as a child myself. So when I speak from the heart of a survivor, and to empower and protect our kids, our families, and our future. So I'll just hand over to Holly so she can introduce herself and we'll get cracking on our amazing content for today.
Thanks, Kelly. Hi, I'm Holly-ann Martin from Safe for Kids. We're a company in Western Australia that deals in training in child abuse prevention education, and we create resources, train teachers, parents, anybody that has anything to do with children, to help keep them safe. We think education is the most important thing as a prevention tool, but we work as a whole of community approach. So we train parents, teachers, everybody in a community, because the old saying, it takes a village, is totally true. And, you know, to stop this, we can't expect children to keep themselves safe. It isn't children's jobs to keep themselves safe. But for me, children are the last line of defence. So by educating everybody around this, we think it's really important that, and that's why Kelly and I are working together, because we come with quite different experiences, but together I think the work that we're doing can be really powerful in helping to keep kids safe.
Yeah, and it's how we came together, because it was the fact that, you know, and I share a lot, and I share on a lot of different platforms now. That wasn't always the case, but it's the process of speaking up and speaking out that brings people who are like-minded, who are passionate, and want to make a difference come together. And so that's how we've connected. And moving forward, we've got a long journey ahead of us, but it's going to be exciting because we've got 12 to 24 weeks where we're going to be covering these pretty full-on topics. So talking, like I said today, about signs of abuse, but looking forward to pornography, disclosing, safe disclosures, grooming, breaking the silence for victims and bystanders, cyber safety, strategies, tips, tactics. Guys, we're going to have it all in this series. So start sharing this video as soon as you see it. Get the word out there. We're going to have some really, really big conversations. So just moving into the first part. Have you got anything else you want to add just now, Hol?
No, I think let's jump in and see where it takes us.
No worries. So I just wanted to start because I think it's really important that we, like I said, it's a tough conversation to have some of this stuff. So before we actually really do get into it, we just want to make sure everybody feels safe. We are going to talk about some tough stuff. You're welcome to message Holly and myself personally, get onto our Facebook pages, but you know, we are going to talk about sexual abuse. We're going to talk about sexual violence, and there is some stuff that's going to come out that could be quite confronting for some people. But the whole purpose of us doing this is to create an environment where you feel safe to have conversations about this and reduce that stigma and that fear that comes when we are having these uncomfortable conversations, or what are generally perceived to be uncomfortable, but we want to take that uncomfortability out of it. Is that a word? I just totally made that word up. Anyway,
yeah, we don't want to trigger anybody. So if we are to, when I work in remote communities, they say, Holly, we like you because you tell us straight way. So if we're too straight way for you and you need to protect yourselves and turn it off, please do that. But know that we don't do this stuff to hurt and trigger people. We do it because we've both got the same passion of keeping kids safe. And, you know, when we talk about the statistics, depending where you find your statistics, when I'm training, I say 1/3 of Australia's children, but that's the whole spectrum. Some people quote 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys. It just depends. But if it's one child, it's one child too many.
That's right. Yep.
So please, like Kelly said, please share our information if you find it useful, because some people just click the like or the heart or whatever and move on. But if you found it useful, then people that you know might find it useful. And just as Kelly said, had she not been on Insight, I would never have met this amazing young woman. And, you know, the power that we can bring together, you just don't know. I've said in other videos, it's the stone in the pond and it's the ripples move out. We will never know how many children or how many adults, because it's not just women that are abused, men are abused as well, how many adults saw this video and thought, you know, it happened to me and I've told nobody, and reach out to somebody to find that help. So please share this, because mainstream media are not covering it. And social media is the only way that I know how to get this out with integrity. And so don't just like it, please share it with everybody you know.
And I just encourage you to, like, don't be afraid of being triggered. Don't be turned off by that initially thinking, oh, that's not going to work for me because that's my story and I don't think I can handle that. You know, it's my story too. And what I can say, and from the absolute heart of hearts, is when you get to that place of feeling like something's coming up for you, ask yourself what that is. And then I encourage you, in fact, I challenge you to send us a message about what you think that is, and we're going to address it. We don't have to name you. We don't have to, you know, put it out there that you've said something specific. But what it is about breaking down these cycles of abuse, these thinking, this poor thinking that, you know, your story is shameful, whatever. It's not. You are brave. You've come through an incredible experience. And, you know, we want to turn this space into a space that is comfortable and safe. And I guarantee you, if you're feeling something, there's other people that are feeling it as well. So, you know, you want to bring it all out into the open and, you know, really change how this looks. So this is the start of it. And, you know, we just want the best for children and families. I don't want people to have the same experience that I had. And, you know, if something does happen, because look, we can't stop it. We cannot stop child abuse. We can make it better. We can reduce the impact. We can, you know, drop the numbers down. So maybe it's not a third of all of the children across the spectrum. You know, if we can just make it better for so many more kids. And if we can do that, then, you know, I feel like I've achieved something with my story.
And Kelly, you're exactly right. If you look back, you know, years ago, we didn't talk about domestic violence, but, you know, thanks to Rosie Batty being so bloody gutsy, you know, it's a lot more acceptable. People are talking about openly now about being gay, and we have gay, you know, marriage rights and things like that, and being trans. But still, we've picked the most, you know, by keeping it a secret and not talking about it, it only perpetuates itself. So if we can bring it out and into the open, shine the light on it. And that's why I'm so grateful to you for being that gutsy woman that, you know, tells her story so articulately. And not everybody's going to be as articulate as you, but, you know, because of the way that you do it, you know, I think so many more people will go, do you know what? I've got a similar story.
Yeah. And it's unfortunately, it's and again, this is not to undermine anybody's experience, but it is just all too common. And that's why we have to do this. So without any further ado,
let's jump in.
Let's crack it open. So I just want to define sexual abuse and sexual violence. And so a lot of people, a lot of organizations will be like, we'll talk about sexual violence, and it's not always violent. Okay, it's not always this violent thing that the media portrays. What the media portrays is the 1%, and that's the 1% of what you might hear about, like a child, you know, was kidnapped and they had an experience with the person, and, you know, the media hones in on that, and then we all of a sudden come up with a stereotype that child abuse is that 1%. It's happening out in the open. It's scary. It's violent. It's horrific. And yes, it is, but that's 1%. What we really want to focus on is the 90%. And the 90% is that which happens behind closed doors by somebody who is known to the child. And within that, there is other statistics. So there's peer-to-peer sexual violence. There's sexual violence that occurs with somebody who's, you know, maybe an uncle or a parent. And there's people who are like authority figures or people in the child's realm, I guess, or circle of influence who are known to the child. So that's the other 90%. And unfortunately, it's the 90% that doesn't get spoken about. So that's what our purpose is here, to speak and focus on that side of things. So when we're defining sexual violence, it actually includes everything from the pornography side of things to child exploitation material, incest, and rape. And again, a child under the age of 12 cannot give consent. Okay, and so there's a lot of offences that come under that, which involve filming, things across the internet, sharing images which are of a child under the age of 12. Even grooming is an offence now. There's new legislation around that if somebody online lies about their age with the intent to groom a child, it becomes a federal offence. And so there's a whole spectrum, and I know, Holly, you probably can speak into that a bit. You've got a real wealth of experience.
Well, a lot of people, Kelly, in my experience, don't actually even realise what happened to them was abuse. And in fact,
that's right, yeah.
Professor Frida Briggs, word bless her, and she's passed away now. She was an 86-year-old feisty professor who studied child abuse and worked with perpetrators and has written some amazing books and things as well. But she passed away 3 years ago, I think it is. She used to interview perpetrators in prison. And, you know, she would say to them, you know, what happened to you as a kid? Oh, nothing happened to me. I wasn't abused. And then, okay, tell me about your first sexual encounter. Oh, well, it was a 15-year-old boy did something to, and they didn't see that was abuse. And so, you know, people think that it's, you know, always violent and things like that. You know, there are so many forms of abuse now. You know, now we've got a name for gaslighting. You know, that wasn't a thing a few years ago. It happened, but nobody actually named it. So many young women are in, you know, relationships and they don't actually consent. They're either coerced or, you know, bullied into it or whatever. But they don't see that as, you know, oh, well, you know, I have to do it because he's my boyfriend or he's my husband or whatever. So, you know, I think we really need to, and we'll probably do a session on this, we really need to identify what is consent. And like you said, I think it might vary from state to state. I think in Western Australia, children under 13 can't consent. And I was talking to a mum just recently who was telling me a story how, you know, the older brother did something to the little sister, and I won't be as blunt as I normally am and go there, but the little girl, because he talked to her, she agreed. So he said, well, I got her consent. No, that's, you know, we need in education, we need to say that for older kids that age can't consent, even if they say, yeah, give it to me. That's not consent. You are breaking the law, because there are so many grey areas around consent.
It is. Yeah, and I was just going to say, like, as you're saying that, I've got these little popcorn things going, my popcorn brain.
As you do.
As I do. Oh my gosh, it's terrible.
I don't want to live in your head.
No, but I was just thinking, like, you know, it's funny that you say that, and this is why we do this, because there's going to be stuff that comes up for either of us. We're going to have these ideas about stuff, and here I am getting distracted. But I'm thinking shame. Okay, so when you said that, and you're talking about, you know, like one of the children saying they gave consent, there's an element of shame in that, because when they realise that what's actually happening is wrong, that's where that silence comes into, and they're just like, oh, I can't say anything about that because I feel so much shame. Like they can't label that emotion, but it's this process of them thinking, even though they've been tricked or groomed, thinking they've actually given permission for this act to occur when they haven't really, and they're not capable. They think they do, because 12-year-olds that act like they're 24-year-olds, they think they've got the ability in their brain to actually make an informed decision about what they want to happen to their body. But that's what science has showed us, that our brains are not equipped at that age. And it's the same for boys. It's the same for women and men. There's different ages of maturity, and this is what they deem to be an appropriate age where they can and cannot make those decisions.
And it's an informed decision.
Correct.
You know, a 3-year-old saying, yes, you can do that, doesn't know the ramifications, doesn't understand all that. So that's why the government have set, the age limit of sex, again, varies from state to state. In many states it's 16, and yet to watch pornography is 18. Yeah. So there's because they realise that the harm that porn does to young people. So this is why I keep harping back to education. I know I do, but it's because, hey, it's my thing.
It's got to be done. It's got to be said.
But we have to, parents have to be, and schools have to be that specific with young people. We had a conference here in WA a couple of years ago where we talked about child-to-child sexual abuse. And so I rang the kids' helpline and to get some statistics on this. And they said in the last 5 years, they've had more than 300 young people ring to say they either had or they were thinking of abusing another child. So that's them self-disclosing, and they're looking for help. So, that's, we're not just talking little stats here. And so, young people, if they haven't got somebody to go to, then unfortunately, they may go to the web to look up this sort of stuff. So if
or experiment in the wrong way.
Yeah,
trying to work out their sexuality, with these suppressed, because they can't get it out in any way, and so these suppressed desires, these because look, we got raging hormones in our bodies. That's normal, and so if there's no way to talk about what's actually going on for them, then they project it in another way. That's what you're saying about the pornography. It becomes really unhealthy.
Yeah. But also, the sexual violence in pornography, and I am going to be blunt here. Sorry, everyone. In every pornographic movie, there is anal sex. And that is what our teens think is totally normal. And you need a lot of consent around a lot of the acts, choking and slapping and that sort of thing. So when young people are watching sexual violence, getting aroused to sexual violence, that's wiring the neural pathways in the brain towards sexual violence. And then when they have their, first sexual encounter and it doesn't go that way, they think that something's happened. What's wrong with me? And she's not acting like that. And, why does she say she doesn't want it up there? And so the 88% of pornography is violence against women.
And we know that's a statement that's, obviously very focused towards women, but that's not exclusive to women.
Oh, so in porn, I'm specifically talking about the pornographic movies that are produced.
Yes,
because it's not only men that watch porn. I was watching a webinar yesterday, and it said that a third of women watch it, and if they're adults, they can do what they like. But it's the sexual violence that is, and the degradation and the spitting on and all of this stuff is huge. And even gay porn, male gay porn, is still a dominant person against a little weedy person, and it's still, there might be two men, but it's still, a dominant person pounding a little person and stuff like that. So it's still violent.
Yeah, well, it just shows like an act of submission or something like that, where that's not always, I guess what you're saying, Holly, just to be really clear, is what pornography is portraying is what's being taught to our kids, because that's where they're going for their education. And so when they're showing up in their relationships, this is how they think it should be. And therefore, that's where we're ending up with these really high statistics of domestic violence, sexual acts that are not consensually given, I guess. So like they're occurring without the consent, and breaking a lot of people's boundaries, which then forces them to, or makes them feel like they've been violated in a way that, is really quite destructive and damaging to people's mental health. So, it's especially adults too. So you got young teenagers, 16, 17, 18, trying to find their way in their sexuality in their life and express themselves to their partners in these ways that aren't healthy. So,
And,
Correct.
you know, we want their first experience. Well, it'll be clumsy. Um, Everybody says clumsy. Well, hopefully mine was clumsy. Now I'm disclosing. But, you know, when I'm working with young people and they're telling me they're never going to have sex because it's so filthy, it's so disgusting, it's so, you know, because of what they're seeing, that really worries me. And, you know, I've had 17-year-old young men tell me that they'd much rather watch porn than be with their girlfriend because that's so exciting and she just lies there. You know, I don't want that for our young people. So,
No, and it's funny you should say that. So, Harry, I'll just picking up what you're saying, because, and this is also the problem for victims and those who've experienced child sexual abuse. They haven't had that beautiful first experience. It's actually
exactly.
been stolen from them,
Yeah.
and it takes a lot of work to get to that place where they're able to have that first experience because of all this stuff, this yuckiness we're talking about.
And the breaking trust.
Yes, exactly right. And they don't know, and they can't just, like, when that's happening and they're feeling really uncomfortable, the trust is lost in that space. And that's why this pornography stuff is really quite destructive as well. It's because that trust factor gets lost because these boundaries are being pushed. And, you know, we're not going to get this, Holly and I aren't going to get this perfect as we're talking about this. We're just having a conversation and putting it out there, because if we don't have this conversation, you know, we're not going to make any headway here. We really want kids to grow up and feel safe and be able to sexually express themselves in a way that is appropriate, that is healthy, that is lawful, you know, that they're able to have healthy life, and teach that to their kids. Because at the moment, what they're learning is unsafe, it is unlawful, and it's costing, like, governments and systems are breaking because of this massive mental health epidemic, because we're not teaching our kids in ways that are safe and you know what I mean?
And Kelly, back to your point about survivors, you know, like you said, you know, they've already had the trust and everything broken, and you know, so if then their first, you know, romantic sexual experience is traumatic as well.
Yeah,
But
that's not good.
I really had a aha moment. I was listening to Richard Fidler on the ABC, a podcast, and he was interviewing a dentist who has now specialised in being a dentist for people that have been sexually abused, because, you know, here is somebody coming at your mouth, which is a private part, and that just, I had, you know, I talk this stuff, it's never happened to me, thank God, but I never had thought about that. But, you know, there are so many things that must trigger survivors, and you know, it could be a song, or I knew a lady who was frightened of butterflies because the perpetrator wore a butterfly belt buckle and things like that.
Yep,
So
I get it. 100% get it.
it must be so much harder for survivors to, you know, surrender over that intimate, you know, the most intimate thing,
Yes,
and then for it to be abusive as well. Just, you know, I
No, I
don't
totally get it, and I'll speak into that, Holly, because that's my experience, and I can say to you right now, I couldn't date anyone who smoked, right? Because my perpetrator was a smoker, specifically white ox rollies, and there's just no way. Every time I smell it, I just am like looking quickly, I snap my head over my shoulder, I'm like, oh my God, he's here, and it stays with you, and it might be the smallest thing, like you're saying, the butterfly belt. You know, it's such small things, and if we don't have a partner who's understanding of those things, and if we're not willing to speak about it, it actually really interferes with sexual intimacy, and maybe we need to look at that. You know, that's a whole topic on its own, and it's going to take a very bold conversation. But it's so very true, because one, you know, I can speak to the fact my first experience was taken from me. Two, I get the triggers 100%, but it's taken me until the last probably 5 to 7 years to be able to say, I'm not okay with that, here's why, and to be able to set my boundaries. But that takes time and work. And in the meantime, every time, you know, an act occurs where I am triggered or have been in the past, you know, it's like that's actually becomes more traumatic because I haven't been able to voice it and I haven't been able to express my boundaries. And kids who are going through this, who are trying to find their way, who are trying to work out what happened to them, if they don't have a safe space to express themselves, they're going to find out the wrong way. And that's really what this is all about. And when we open up and we start looking at sexual violence and looking into the definitions of it, it's really important to understand. And maybe what we do need to do, Hol, is actually go and describe what the legislation is around rape, around incest, around, because a lot of people, and I speak to a lot of kids about rape. I tell them the definitions and I explain to them what it is. And they don't understand that digital penetration is rape. Okay, that's using fingers. Digits are fingers. And so anything that is forced into a person's body without consent is rape. And so there's clear lines, and people think, oh, just because he touched me with his fingers and he put them inside of me. Well, that's not actually a violation because it wasn't, with his penis. They don't actually think it's an offense. It's still a violation. This is your body. You have a right to say what happens with your body.
And for men, when people think of sexual abuse of men, they think of anal penetration. When it could be fondling, it could be oral, it could be, and so that's why. Back to Professor Frida Briggs, she actually believed that more men were sexually abused than women. Just men are less likely to talk about it for several reasons. They think, people will think I'm gay. It doesn't make you gay. They might think, and a lot of the problem is that they think, I'll turn into a perpetrator. No, you won't. But in all her studies, and I mean, she studied it for over 40 years, she really believed that more men are abused. And it's that whole definition. So I'm glad you pointed that out, because, it's not just, vaginal penetration. That is, kids seeing pornography, being shown pornography is abuse. And the other thing I'd really like to bring up, and I saw it yesterday again in the paper, the way the media, so-and-so did not go to jail for having sex with a child under 13. What? It's not having sex. She was raped. She can't consent because she's under the, and yet the media sort of sugarcoat it. We need to start naming it up. We cannot be, not to offend people. When children are being given marijuana for sex, people say they're selling themselves. No, they're being trafficked, actually.
Or they're being groomed, yeah.
And it's used as part of the grooming, but to say that they're selling themselves, or, child prostitution.
That just comes from ignorance, Holly, though, hey?
It does, and that's
ignorance, and it's a lack of awareness, and I think it's really insensitive. And, we all want to have an opinion about stuff, but when it comes to this kind of topic, and this is where I get really cranky, is if you don't have the right information, ask a question, but don't push your opinion if you don't actually have any idea about it, because it can be so very destructive for somebody who's watching that, who's actually got a story to tell, and they're looking at it going, I'm never going to say anything about what happened to me. I'm never going to speak up because of what that person said there. And if I can just encourage, and I'm not trying to say what to do or don't, I guess I just want to encourage people that, we all get very angry about people who commit child sexual offences, because it is so ingrained in our society that it is wrong, that we don't become inclusive to perpetrators in this, because at the end of the day, perpetrators most of the time are also victims. And I'm not trying to take sides in this, because I guess I have my own story here, okay? But at the end of the day, if we're going to stop abuse from happening, and if we're going to break cycles, we need to talk about all parts of it and be respectful to the people's stories you're not aware of, okay? Because if there's 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 people, I'm sure 5 people, that's one person out of your small circle of friends who's actually had a sexual experience that wasn't consensual. And so we need to be mindful of that when we're commenting, if we're making comments on social media, because people are going to see that and they're going to be like, well, that's my friend, and they're not a safe person to speak to. And
the other thing is, when we were doing these conferences, we actually brought a guy from Germany. There's a program in Germany, and there are ads on the TV in Germany, and he actually showed it was in German, but there was a guy on a train and a mum sitting next to him. He looked about a 10-year-old boy, and this sort of guy sort of leering at him. And in German, it said, if you feel like this, if you find yourself attracted to children, please call this number. So in Germany, there are programs, but here in Australia, like those boys ringing the kids' helpline looking for help, there is so little help for people like this. And
it does exist, but it is, like you're saying, there's not much of it. And I guess that's something we could probably start to look at trying to implement, you know.
Well, and it's only people having conversations like this, and there are more people asking, well, where are the programs for this? Before, I mean, we had a program here in Western Australia that worked with the whole family. That worked with the men who were the perpetrators. I think they had 2 women through the program that were perpetrators. Parents, the mums, and the children. All they worked with them individually, but as a whole collective. And then the government withdrew money because they worked with the men. They wanted to support the women and the kids. But if we don't work with this part of the problem, it's not going to change. No. So it has, some children don't want the parent to go to prison. They just want it to stop. So, we need programs that can, empower everybody to have safe plans and things like that. Because, like you said before, a lot of people, I've known children who were taken out of a family because something happened to them, and then they're put into foster care, and they've said to me, Holly, if I knew what was going to happen, I wouldn't have told.
Yeah, and that makes me sad, because the kids are already silenced before it's begun. And so we don't want to do that. We just, like I said, Holly and I don't know everything. We're just having a very off-the-cuff, unscripted conversation here about things that even challenge us. I mean, I'm challenged by this conversation because there's a lot of stuff I really want to say, and this is such a big topic. We could talk hours and hours on this.
We will.
And we are going to, but even now, we sort of set aside an hour, but we haven't even moved past the first point that we had written down. So it's just one of those things that we're just it is such a big space, and by having these conversations, we will problem solve along the way. However that looks, I'm not sure, but you know what, we're rolling with it. And we're inviting you to join us on the journey, and to be okay with that, to embrace this with us, and be brave with us, because this is a step outside my comfort zone. I'm happy to talk about this stuff all day long, but to do it on a big scale like we're trying to achieve here, we really do need your support in order to make this what we envisage it to be. So there's a lot of definitions, and I just encourage you to and it's different state by state too. There's small nuances in each offence that might actually be a little bit different. It's generally the same, but sometimes it's called a different thing, like aggravated assault in the US compared to domestic violence legislation here. There's all types of different types of legislation across the world, but essentially it is the same. And there's some stuff that is international. So trafficking and that type of stuff is actually legislation that governs international laws that apply for that kind of stuff, which I actually don't know a lot about, but it is something that I'm learning about. So, we don't know everything, Holly and I, but we're just two, as you said, two birds who want to make a difference in the child protection space, and we're going to try and do it as bravely as we can. So, talking about consent, as Holly said before, it is state by state, but generally speaking, you cannot give consent under the age of 16. Okay, and a child under the age of 12 really can't give consent. So that becomes, so there's a difference there, and there's a real grey area between the age of 12 and 16. And it's really unfortunate, but you might have a 15-year-old and a 14-year-old having a sexual relationship, which I'm probably going to open up a whole can of worms here. They technically can't give consent, okay? But it doesn't mean they're not going to experiment when they're around the same age. And so it comes down to individual cases when it's between those ages as to what's actually going on, whether the one party or the other has an upper hand, or is coerced or threatened or done something in that to make that happen. Okay, so definitely a child under the age of 12. So that becomes things like indecent acts, that becomes unlawful carnal knowledge. Those types of offences are what's happening under the age of 12. Anything above the age of 12 becomes things like rape. Okay, that's the type of offences we're looking at. But between these, it's so confusing, I'm sorry, but it just is. Legislation is not always cut and dry. Between the age of 12 and 16, it's very much depending on what happens in that space. If, like I said, one person has more power or authority over the other, if they're experimenting, if they're boyfriend and girlfriend, because you can't stop kids from experimenting sometimes, like new boyfriends, new couples, and you know, they want to go and do things together, but sometimes it doesn't go so well, you know. Then we start getting into things like sexting and dick pics and the whole dating thing. You know, it's a very big thing in high school now. You know, they sort of not dating until they've sent each other a nude photo. And so then we start looking at pornography offences. There's just a whole plethora of stuff. And again, I think we would probably do like one session per offence if we wanted to. But I guess that's where we need to sort of empower you guys. Like, if you are curious about that, just go and look it up. You can look up the criminal code anywhere you want. Yes, go ahead, Hol.
I was just going to say the other things to consider is if they have an intellectual disability, because then they're not, even if they were two 15-year-olds, and if one had an intellectual disability, you know, that there's a power difference there. We've had a couple of cases in Western Australia where an 18-year-old had sex with a 15-year-old, but because of the age range, so if it was two 15-year-olds, there probably wouldn't have been a charge, but because there was an age range, and also if the person has sort of like a teacher or is in a thing of authority.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's a lot of people that don't understand all that. And the other thing that really astounds me is the imbalance when, you know, you hear on the news, you know, a 30-year-old teacher had sex with his 14-year-old student, you know, they're out with the pitchforks and the, you know, things. But if a 30-year-old teacher had a, you know, an affair with a 14-year-old boy, oh, he's a lucky dog. You know,
that's that stigma though too. That's that whole stereotype around that sort of stuff, and it comes back to our beliefs about you know, male and female roles, and that's what we're taught in society. So, you know, it's funny, like Holly and I haven't, like, we are pre-recording, but we're pre-recording live, so you know, we don't get to cut this and edit it. It is what it is. But as we're starting to talk about this, I'm going, man, there's so much stuff here, like phenomenal. And I guess it's just a start. Like, let's just start the ball rolling. Like, this is what it is. It's tough. It is confusing. It is grey. The black and whites are the 12-year-old thing. So 12 years of age, cannot give consent. End of story. Okay. 16 is the age of consent in most states. I don't think there's any difference in Australia. Across and overseas, it may be a little bit different, but I'm not certain. So I'm speaking from I'm in Queensland. Holly's in Western Australia. So the age of consent in Queensland is 16, and I think across most states in Australia, it's the same.
I'm not sure if it's changed. There used to be, and it may have changed, been updated. Some of the states had different ages for
sodomy.
Yeah, people that were gay, identify as gay,
or anal sex, because not everybody who's gay. Heterosexual people have anal sex too, is what I was trying to say. So
and more than you think, according to the experts.
Yeah, but I guess that's the thing. So, but some states, the age for consent for sodomy is 18, not 16, and so
that's the best way.
That's what you meant. That's what you meant. I get it. So yeah, so I mean, like, this is a tough conversation, and you know, we might crack jokes by any. We do that for our own comic relief too, because this is tough for us to be sitting here and having this conversation. So don't think that if we're laughing, it's because we're dismissing what we're talking about. But you know, it is a tough space to come from. So you know, before you start typing your questions in line, but you didn't say this, you didn't say that, just have a think about where we're coming from, a very authentic place with the heart to empower you. And that's why we're doing this pre-recorded video. So if you've got questions and you're not really sure, please throw them in the link. Add your questions as they're coming up for you. We may answer it by the end of the video, I don't know. But that is how we're going to operate this partnership, Holly and I. So next week, And stay tuned because we will update you as to the times of when we're going to go live, and we'll answer those questions for you. Because again, Holly and I aren't perfect. We don't know every single thing there is. And speaking off the cuff like this, we could go off a script, but stuff's still going to come up. Okay. And we're going to forget stuff. But again, we're just two birds having an authentic conversation about stuff that matters to empower you. So that's where we're coming from. I wanted to, how long have we been going for, Hol? I didn't look at time. No, you're right. I just, because we did want to talk about the signs of abuse. So, you know, I think it's really really important to understand consent, and that alone is a whole thing on itself. And maybe, Holly, we need to talk about that next instead of going straight into grooming, because I think the consent issue, the same for many teenagers, they just don't understand what it looks like to get consent. And that's just coming up for me right now. I'm going to write it on a piece of paper. I think consent, and there's a couple of good videos actually that really help with consent. Have you seen the T in consent?
Oh, there's a much better one. It's called Consent and a Bike Ride.
Oh, well, I need to look at that then too. But
you'll love it. It's hilarious. It's got a little thing in there about a one bike stand. It's very clever.
One bike. Oh, very, very punny. I see. So yeah, so you know, defining sexual violence is a really important part of this, and again, it's going to be different. But if you've got questions, please ask us. We're not going to be offended by your questions. We'll probably be offended if you start yelling and screaming at us because we didn't do something you wanted us to do. But that's why we're just asking you to please put it in the feed, and we'll do what we can to make sure we get there for you. So why don't we just I'll pause this recording. I think there's just so much, because I've got psychological signs of abuse that I'd like to speak about. There's physical signs, there's emotional signs, and there's just a lot in that. And I think it probably deserves its own video. Holly, what do you reckon?
Well, and sometimes there aren't any signs. That's the other thing. You know,
Right.
quite often I'm asked, you know, how would I know? And, you know,
You don't always know.
You know, it's not as if they're all wetting the bed or they're all, you know, doing certain things. As you said right in the beginning, every person's experience is so different. Two people could have exactly the same experience and still handle it differently. So,
you can't
know,
measure that trauma.
Sorry?
You can't measure it either.
No, it's on life experiences, the support mechanisms and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, people want a checklist. Sometimes, especially teachers, want a checklist of, you know, what were the signs that, how would I know a kid in my class is being abused? I'm sorry, there is no checklist.
And I guess it depends too. When you talk about sexual violence being a violent act, you know, some kids unfortunately are stuck in this space where it is very violent for them. And I say violent is because they're forced to have sex, they're raped repeatedly. And I hate saying that, and it makes me cringe because it is the story and it is the truth for some children, unfortunately. And at other times, and this is like my situation, is it's quiet and it's cunning and it doesn't physically hurt so much. And you can't really tell that it's happening because everybody's being tricked and it's behind closed doors and it's sneaky, and you aren't going to know about it because the child is so carefully groomed that they don't have the words to describe what's actually going on. So you won't know. And that's where parents get stuck blaming themselves, saying, I should have seen this. I should have known about this. I should have seen the signs.
I know.
Yeah. And I just, for any of those parents out there, I just want to release you from that. It's not your fault. You will not know because I'm that kid who was stuck in that very silent, tricky kind of space. And my mum herself is a survivor. And we could even get her on one night to talk about what it's like being a parent. But it's not your fault because you were tricked as well. And the child was groomed so well so as not to speak about it, so you wouldn't know. So don't beat yourself up for 1 second thinking, I should have seen the signs, because your child was taught not to show you the signs. Okay, and so I'm You may not believe me when you hear me say that, but unfortunately, that is the deep and dark and cunning nature of grooming and of child abuse and the 90%. Okay, you're not going to see the signs, but there are clues. There are clues, and if you are well and truly connected with your child and you have a relationship with them where they trust you, where they are happy to share with you, even if it's scary, then they may be willing to share what's happening to them before it becomes an ongoing issue. And that is the heart behind this, because I know from my own experience that, I mean, my mum and I had a brilliant relationship, and I trusted her, and I would tell her everything. I'd tell Dad everything, but I still didn't speak up. And there's nothing I don't think Mum could have seen or known that would have changed that outcome. And so having that connection, even if it's still going on, may not be the answer, but it is the best answer I have. And it is what I understand of child abuse and the hundreds of disclosures I've taken, the stories that I've heard. And it just comes down to being able to read and feel what's going on with your kids. Very intuitive sort of thing, I think. But having those conversations means at least there's an opportunity. And if you're giving your kids that opportunity, you've done what you can. And I think that's the most important thing. So, but knowing the signs of abuse, so there's psychological signs, and, you know, as Holly mentioned, there's wetting the bed, and there's all that sort of stuff that's actually going on. And a kid who is generally a well-connected, engaged sort of a child might withdraw. They might get really quiet. They might not want to go to their uncle's house, for example, because my perpetrator is my uncle. So I'll probably say that off the cuff. But they might not want to go and spend time with him, or they actually might be really excited to go and spend time with him, overly excited. If they're overly excited to spend time with a family member, ask yourself why. You know, so it's either one of two things that you think, how can they be excited to go to a perpetrator's house? But that's part of the grooming process as well. Okay, so it's either, for me, as I've experienced it and what I know to be true, is that it's like opposite ends of the scale. They're either completely repelled, don't want to go there, or they want to completely spend every moment with them, because the perpetrator has groomed and isolated them from the family. Okay, they've said a lot of things to them. They've made it exciting and fun. And, you know, I may even come undone in this process, you guys, because there's a lot of stuff I probably haven't voiced, but as we have these conversations, I'm going to share with you what's coming up, because I think that is the best gift I can give to you from my experience, to hopefully empower. And you might actually see something and go, oh my God, that's happening to my kid. And, you know, it might trigger something for you and go, I think I've seen that, and ask your kid, have a conversation. You know, I would love to hear if something comes up for you out of this. I want to know about it. It just helps us do our job. It helps Holly and I to speak and continue to do what we're doing, because it's not easy. We've had conversations, Holly and I, about because it's a bit of a lonely road standing out here at times doing this sort of stuff and having these big conversations, because it is hard. It's hard work. I got to go to bed after this and have a sleep, and it's like, and I've just got these thoughts going around in my head about, oh, I should have said this, should have said that. Like, you know, that's my gift to you guys. I'm not taking anything from this, you know, but I take from it that it's empowering and it's impacting, and hopefully you pick something up from this. So I don't know, over to you, Holly.
Well, Kelly, I'd like to thank you for always speaking from the heart. And, you know, we won't always get it right, and we might make a faux pas and stuff like that, because, you know, we're having to adjust and learn on the way. But, you know, we just want people to have these conversations. You know, so many of the things that I had popcorn going off in my head when you were talking, because, you know, when I get to talk about the program and helping kids have a safety team of 5 adults, and, you know, earlier you were talking about you get that feeling when somebody's smoking, and in the program we call it early warning signs. So, I'm not saying that protective education is a magic wand, but
No,
it'll
but it
give
helps.
everybody some, sorry?
It helps.
It will give people some really common language to be able to, talk with their children and not, the reason I contacted you was to find out because you shared in the video that at 12, um, your perpetrator was charged and your mum asked you, had it happened to you? And I initially contacted you to say, Kelly, what could I have written or what resource could I have made that would have given you the tools or even helped your mum have that conversation with you? Because most parents, I know of a young girl who was date raped at 14. But ever since she was a baby, she grew up hearing her dad say, I'll kill the bastard, it hurt my little girl. So she hears this year after year, gets to 14, is date raped, and couldn't tell anybody because she
Yeah.
didn't want her dad to go to jail. So, you know, by you talking so openly and eloquently about your situation, I know you might not think it always is, but it comes across very eloquent to me.
Excellent.
You know, that's what we want to do. We want to help parents. When we get to disclosures, we'll give people a script of how to hear it, because you are going to want to get your gun and shoot them. But if you say that to your child's not going to tell you. So, with you being so open to this, can only help, everybody. And so I really want to thank you. And I hope people get value of this and I hope people share it, because like I said earlier, we just don't know. I'm sure we're going to get people that, get upset about one thing that we said, missing all the good things that we said. But, we're just trying to do our best to keep kids safe.
Yeah, and that's the heart of it, isn't it? And thank you for talking me up. Yeah, but it is, and it comes from a beautiful place of, I guess, innocence, because, while I've got my own story, it really is that, Holly and I, we just care, and I don't want to see kids struggling and just having that hard time talking, because even now as an adult, like you'll watch this space I'm becoming, but it's hard because I've still got things that are very subconscious to me that I struggle with. And like you might say, oh no, she's great, she's talking, she's doing all this, but the things still come up for me. And it's only because I've got good people in my network and because I'm willing to step into this space that I'm able to do this. And it's not for everybody, but again, I just encourage you, if you've got a story and you want to share, if you've got questions or things are coming up for you in this, because things will come up for me and Holly differently because of who we are and our experiences. But if something's coming up for you, again, I just encourage you, don't dismiss that trigger, because there's something there that is asking you to respond. That's how I look at triggers. I'm going, okay, what's this? I need to deal with whatever this thing is that's come up. Whether it's that I didn't act on something, or I don't understand something, or I need a resolution, I now look, instead of going, oh, I'm going to shut down from that and I'm going to turn that off, I'm going, what is it for me that I need to learn from this? And it's only when you start to do that that you're going to get the information and be empowered in whatever that thing is for you. So if something's coming up for you, yes, if you need to, turn it off. Okay, you can always come back and watch it later. But I just really encourage you to just take a breath, ask yourself what it is and what do you need to know, and ask us. Whether you private message, whether you send us an email or an inbox, or go to one of our websites, Safe for Kids Australia or kellyhumphries.com, and you send an inquiry, whatever or however you feel safe to ask that question, we invite that from you. But please don't dismiss that trigger, because there's something there for you. And I just really encourage you to just acknowledge it. Don't beat yourself up for it, but just be open to the experience of learning something that could actually really help you or your family. So, if you feel brave enough, pop it in the feed, but definitely please share our videos. We can only get better at doing this together, because it is, we've still got like a massive session that we were going to talk about the signs today, but I think we just talk about what sexual violence is and how we encompass it in the consent stuff. So we've covered a fair bit today, but we might actually push on to the sexual abuse and the signs and psychological, emotional and physical signs of abuse on the next video that we have. But opening up all those questions, pop them in the feed for us. And Holly, can you just share that your website?
Yeah, so it's just safe4kids.com.au.
Okay, beautiful. Is there anything you want to add?
And yeah, so my Facebook page is Safe for Kids as well. We both have a YouTube channel. So in the notes above, we can put the links to the YouTube channel so that I know I've got lots of more information for parents and teachers and some really great songs that I've made with kids. And I know that you're hoping to build your YouTube following. So we'll put the links above.
Beautiful. All right, well, we might end it there today, Holly, and we'll come back again for the next video on the signs. So we'll talk about the psychological signs of sexual abuse. And so when we talk about that, we're talking about things like depression and anxiety and what's actually coming up for kids and even adults in that space. What role PTSD might play in that, and complex PTSD, because they're very different. Complex PTSD is talking about something that's been ongoing for a very long time. What disassociation means, because I think these are really important signs, you know, because for disassociation is when you separate yourself from your body. And I think when I was a kid, and I'll probably talk about this again, but when I was hit by a car when I was 19 or 18, and I said to the police officer, it was like I watched the whole thing happen. And he's like, what were you taking? I was like, I wasn't taking anything, but it's a coping mechanism that we just have. And that if somebody knew that I was disassociating, they might go, why is that? And it's really interesting because of my experience now. I can pick, this sounds really terrible, I can pick a child who's had sexual abuse as part of their past very easily from their behaviors. And it's because I'm invested in that and I know about it and I'm aware of it. But it's cues like that disassociation that once we know about it, we can go, hang on, that's a psychological symptom of child abuse. Let me ask some questions. And so when we're seeing these things, that's why we want to talk about it, because we can actually pick up a lot of stuff in this. Personality disorders, attachment issues, addictions, eating disorders, the withdrawal side of things, suicide, self-harming. That's just psychological stuff. Okay, that's not even including any of our emotional stuff that we want to get through, and that includes crikey, there's a lot. Sexual themes in like drawings and play, how kids interact with each other, the language that they're speaking, some of the things that a 5-year-old shouldn't actually have any knowledge about. And so if you're hearing them talking about sex and like sexy things and acting in an over-sexualized manner, these are cues. And so we really want to get down to the bottom of that. So if you're liking what you're hearing, we're going live on what we've discussed today next week. Okay, so stay tuned for those dates and those times. And then the next one that we do, we're going to go into these signs, these physical, psychological and emotional signs of child abuse. Okay, so thank you guys for being part of this with us. We're going to continue to show up however that looks, and we'd love you to do that with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.